Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. I'm happy to be back with an expert who manages to take topics that can seem quite technical and turn them into practical conversations that every business leader can learn from. Let's take a closer look at quality management today, organizational culture, and ethical behavior, and why these updates on ISO 9001:2026 are really about building stronger organizations. Here's the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip, Ian Erskine. Hi, Ian.
And
Welcome
good
back.
mor- and good morning to everyone, and
Morning.
to you, Miles, and your lovely family. And I trust you had a wonderful weekend, and everyone had a wonderful weekend. And yes, and I had a very relaxing. We had a very relaxing weekend,
That's
and
good.
yeah, which often is quite good because it gives you. I don't know. I often say to people, take those power naps and have the chance, particularly at night. Make sure you have a really good, decent sleep because that's
Uh-huh.
where your whole body recharges.
Mhm.
And particularly for your brain, it allows it to recharge and bring things to the forefront for you to remember the next day. And uh,
Yes.
and that's the way
Check.
I look at it. Yes.
That's great to hear, Ian. So, to kick things off with ISO 9001:2026, now reaching the final draft international standard stage, what are the biggest changes, Ian, organizations should understand, and what has stayed consistent, especially around governance, ethical behavior, and quality culture?
Well, before we actually get into the two main things that have changed, I think it is worthwhile just to mention what is actually meant by the FDIS version of ISO 9001. Now, FDIS means Final Draft International Standard. Now, basically, once it gets to that stage, everything apart from minor changes is locked out. So they're just wanting the technical committee meetings to come together and look at if there's been spelling mistakes or and small typographic errors and things like that. So at this stage, the two main things that have been flagged and are in the requirements are ethical behaviour and quality culture. And this is where it becomes very, very important just to remember and also understand in a standard, when it mentions shall, that indicates a requirement. So that's where they talk about you need to demonstrate conformity to comply. Okay. Should indicates a recommendation. So they're recommending that you actually do an activity or do something in reference to a requirement, right? Now, may indicates a permission or can indicates a possibility or a capability. Now, again, this is quite interesting because when we look at information marked as a note, right, now there's a number of additional notes being put in, particularly when we're talking about ethical behaviour and ethics in the quality policy. There are notes there for additional guidance.
Ah,
Now, as we said before we came on air, the reason why this is done is because when we talk about ethical behaviour, that's something that is very dear to people's hearts, very dear to a business ethics,
mhm.
right? And because basically there is good in everyone, right? Everyone sets out to do the right thing. Yet there are occasions that, and I put it this way, there are occasions that, yes, we do stuff up, okay? And I jokingly call myself, when I do that, a muddle-headed wombat, right? And things like that. But you need to be very careful if you begin to question someone's ethics. You must have the factual evidence. You must be able to give the organisation or even that person
True.
the ability to clarify. Because if you jump straight in and make an accusation, that is completely wrong because the adage always in true, you are innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Okay. And that's why I believe ISO has made a specific point in their notes to actually demonstrate, yes, you do need to look at ethical behaviour because that has a strong influence on an organisation and how it is perceived out in the broader community.
Yeah, I agree. And that reminds me that sometimes the biggest update is not actually rewriting the rule book, it's reinforcing the values that make the rule book work in the first place. And that naturally brings us to leadership, Ian. Policies are one thing, but people watch what leaders actually do. From your perspective, how should top management practically demonstrate ethical behavior in a way that genuinely shapes day to day decisions and not just policy requirements or documents?
Um, this can be a what's the word for it? Intriguing question because again it goes back to uh, wanting to do the right thing, and again an understanding that we are all human.
Mhm.
As leaders, we must understand that everyone is ultimately sets out to do the right thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, this is where you need to pay particular attention to the actual quality culture of your business. So,
Mhm.
people again, and we've done it in a number of episodes where we've talked about people must have that awareness of total quality management, TQM. They must have that awareness of doing it once, doing it right, right? Now, when we talk about doing it right, in society today, there's certain rules, requirements, statutory laws, and things like that. And we often talk about primary duty of care, rule of law, and things like that. And again, this comes back to the broader changes where we've spoken about the two key elements which have changed
Mhm.
ethical behaviour and ethics within the quality policy. This is where it comes back to demonstrating and showing people and showing uh, your supervisors that when you're working, you are actively attempting and driving to do the right thing, right?
Yeah.
And and again, this comes back to when we're talking about a quality culture within the leadership team and a quality culture within the organisation.
Mhm.
This comes across at everything the organisation does, right? And you can take you guys, for instance, you strive to do the very best as podcasters to deliver a message on behalf of your customers,
Uh-huh.
right? And you give them the tools to do that and promote themselves after that podcast.
Mhm.
Now, to do that, obviously, you've got to do your research as the podcast leader, and the person that's coming on has to be able to have their facts lined up so that they can demonstrate the service that they are promoting.
Mhm.
And this is where, yes, it is very, very interesting when we talk about ethical behaviour within the realms of leadership. And this is where in 5.1.1, the required bullet point I, it talks about quality culture and ethical behaviour because they go hand in hand. Okay, they can't just stand separately. And and as I said, it has to become part of that culture of the business, and the way I always look at it when I go into a business, I look even before I get there. I do a web search and just have a look to see whether they're involved in community activities. They could be
Mhm.
supporting a local football team, the netball team, or something like that. And that's where then they're actually the business are actually going out wanting to be part of the community
Mhm.
and this is why quite often I find it so pleasing is when people within an organisation, their children are born, they come along into school and so forth, and often a business will support some of that school's activities in a
Mhm.
way of supporting their employees. And again, this comes back to ethical behaviour and quality culture, and that's a way of demonstrating it.
Mhm. I like that perspective, Ian, because culture is what people experience every day. It's not what hangs on the office wall, and that guides everyone in the organization to do what is right. And speaking of people, organizations are also adapting to new technologies and AI. How should organizations be thinking about aligning their quality policy with both ethical expectations and workforce capability, particularly when emerging technologies are starting to replace certain human roles?
A very, very interesting point, and one that's very dear to me, uh, because I am seeing where people are being replaced. And excuse me, I always say to organisations, we have to embrace technology. Yes, totally agree with that. But people, number one, people have to understand, particularly when we're talking about systems, systems don't run on technology. Systems run with people. People can be assisted by technology, and in fact, I encourage that, right? But at all times, you must ensure that it is ethical. You must ensure that there is integrity within the process, right? And this is where I'm finding it difficult to come to grips, and I'm continually trying to find people that can answer me the question where if someone does a search through AI, they put their own document in, it goes away into a data center, and then basically the person that's doing that is doing that with an expectation that is going to be improved. Now, the facts with AI can't do that. The only way AI does that is through algorithms, dragging in a whole heap of other information to put it in, and the algorithms will pick out what is perceived to be the best and then send it back to you. Now, what I'm saying here, again, we must embrace technology, totally agree with that, but you must always have that human oversight on everything we do. Now, if we look at this and we take this to the extreme where there's an organization that is building robots, right? And the robots then are allowed out. Now, I believe in America, there are some fast food chains that are actually using robots to deliver the food to the people in their homes or the restaurants. Now, I've actually seen some footage of this with the robots marching up and down the street, right? Now, I would have thought it would have been one of the first things that you would have taught the robot. Again, humans run the robots. The robots just don't run by themselves, right? Now, I'm watching these robots march up and down the street, and actually, there was one case where it nearly knocked over a pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're saying here, well, hang on, it's not the right of the robot to give way to the pedestrian, right? They have right of way. Now, if that's the way they're going to develop robots, I'm sorry, I'm not for it, right? But
Yeah.
again, this is where there has to be a human side. Now, I think in time they will develop with different cameras and so forth. My goodness
Yeah.
me, there's someone coming to me, I have to move to one side and
Yeah.
things like that. To me, that would be common sense, right?
Right.
But yeah, but it's this having this oversight and understanding the embracement of uh, people at all times. And that's where we demonstrate the ethical behavior, right? And we also, again, we develop and understand this within the quality policy, right? Okay, yeah. Well, if you're going to use SharePoint and other word tools and things like that, that's fine, but you always must have the human oversight. And it's a bit like
Mhm.
I'm now seeing emails come to myself, right? Addressed to myself, yes, right? But when it comes to who it's come from, they use the word team or it's just left blank. And
Okay.
the dead giveaway is at the bottom of that email, there's a code.
Uh-huh.
Now, that code is linked to a person, which may be the address of the person who it's been sent to, for my sake, Ian Erskine, right? But it just says team or often left blank. Now that is a sure telltale sign that that's come through as an AI generated email. So
Yeah.
basically, the person doing that, oh, I want to send an email to an automated email, click the button, send it off. And I say to people, how impersonal is that?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
And I know when we as things have evolved. And look, I went to school before the time of emails and things like that, right? And I have always been taught that, if you're going to send a letter or you're going to send an email, those have to be your own personal thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly if it's a business, right, it has to be the thoughts purely of the business representing what you actually want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, embrace technology. And again, this is where we talk about this in the quality policy, right? Now, that's in the annex, but it's also under seven, yeah, in the annex is where it talks about we need to use resources, right? But again, we've got to be aware of capability and organizational knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right? And going back to what we said before with technology and ethical behavior, quality culture, to achieve that, there has to be this awareness,
Yeah.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the wanting to do things correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And when we drill on that just for a minute, when we want to do things correctly, we've got to understand what we're actually attempting to achieve in the first place, right?
Right.
And there will be situations when, as an employee, you may well be asked to do something where you yourself have seen, well, sorry, we can't do that because if we do that, that will affect the quality of the product and the product will then actually fail, right? That's where you yourself, this is where your ethics come in. You as an employee need to step up and say, no, well, sorry, have you thought that that may impact? And for argument's sake, the supervisor may well come back, well, no, sorry, you're the guys that handle the product. I hadn't thought of that. That's a very good point. Let's sit down. We'll talk through the process together
Mm-hmm.
and then make the necessary changes, if at all, right, to to put that product back into the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really appreciate you emphasizing that important point, Ian, because technology can certainly help us move faster. But good judgment, accountability, critical thinkers, and capable people are still what keep organizations moving in the right direction. So let's continue this with the people side of the equation. What are the most effective ways organizations can ensure people truly understand their role in quality culture, ethical behavior, due diligence, and responsibilities like modern slavery compliance and government frameworks?
Yeah, and this is what we discussed before, that you know, if you are going to question someone's ethics, you really have to have the evidence, and there has to be a reason why you're going to do that, right? Now, and this is where I have already started to talk to auditors that are coming through to us and asking this very question, what do we expect from an organisation to be able to present to us so that they can demonstrate to us that they have ethical behaviour firmly nailed. They have the quality culture, the quality ethical culture within the business running smoothly. And this is where governance of the organisation comes in. And again, my experience as an auditor, one of the first things I look at within an organisation is number one, is that organisation nationally registered?
Mm-hmm.
Here in Australia, that's the asset registration, right? Now other countries have their own registration, so I look to ensure that they have their registration up to date. Generally, that's an annual registration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they demonstrate to the regulator that they have the right people in place, they have a governance board and things like that. So you want to have a look at the governance process, right? And this goes into looking at their culture, their principles, their values, and you marry that up to what the actual organisation is doing, not only within the workplace, but within the community. And so you look at that. And again, you mentioned the all organisations need to be able to demonstrate that they have an understanding of modern slavery principles,
Uh-huh.
right? You can't enslave anyone. Okay. Now, it was brought to my attention, and it was quite scary, and that you have to actively ensure that a person has within their workplace the ability to speak freely, the ability to stand up and say, "No, I'm sorry, this is wrong." Okay.
Mhm.
If you don't have that ability, that's where you start to verge into that danger zone of unethics, right? And so they're the things. So, you know, the common things I look for is the rule of law. There's an understanding within the whole business of a rule of law. There's an understanding of primary duty of care, right? Now that differs down the roles from the owner of the business to the person that may be the cleaner. The
Mhm.
cleaner has a primary duty of care in their own role, right?
Yeah.
It also then we look at chain of responsibility. Then we look at due diligence and governance, principles, values, ethics, and culture. Corporate social responsibility, as I said before, how does the organisation fit into the community? How do that organisation help to represent and support employees within the organisation? And again, that's a great way that they can do that is abide by corporate social responsibilities guidelines, where we talk about principles, values, ethics, and culture, right? And if we talk through those issues and we have that at front of mind, and as an auditor, these are the first things that an auditor should be looking at, right? And we should be
Yeah.
looking at this at the very first part of when we sit down and we do our opening meetings, and then you just ask the routine questions. How has the business been running? Can you give me some positive outcomes that you've achieved and so forth? And but this is where you need to address that in the context of the organisation.
Mhm. And I hope everyone got that summary coverage because when people understand the why, they're much more likely to embrace the how. I think that's something every organization can relate to, Ian. Now, looking at ISO 9001 2026 as a whole, do you see these updates as strengthening sustained success rather than adding compliance burden? And how should organizations shift their mindset to better embrace improvement, learning, and innovation while staying grounded in risk and responsibility?
Well, sustained success is the most important one there. Now, to achieve sustained success, we must have a system that is adding efficiency and effectiveness to the organisation.
Mhm.
You must not be looking to have a system for compliance only, because if you're looking to have a system for compliance only, ultimately people will start to act like robots, right?
Yeah.
There
Hmm.
won't be any empathy, there won't be any happiness there. Now, one of the key things, and again, from my experience, I go back to an organisation that I used to do in Perth, WA, and one of the young drivers had put the semi trailer on its side, and interestingly enough, he was carting TNT explosives.
Oh.
He was safe, but he ended up in hospital. Actually, the prime mover was literally undamaged, luckily, and but
Mhm.
luckily for him, he was safe, but he ended up in hospital. Now, I was basically called over to WA to actually talk to this young fella because I'd actually got to know him quite well. And it was quite interesting. He had confided into me that he'd only recently been married and everything was going well. They were in a family way, and then in that 12 months prior to me this happening, I had lost a little bit of touch. But the moment the managing director mentioned this person's name, I knew exactly who it was. And he said to me, "Yes, Ian, that's why I want you to come across to Perth." Now it's a 2.5 hour flight. And I said, "Okay, I'll have to book the flight." And he immediately said,
Mhm.
"Look, I'm sorry, Ian, but I've already booked your flight, if you don't mind," because it was, and he said it was quite serious. And so anyway, so I hopped on the plane, went over and had a chat to this young guy, and I said, "Listen, we all make mistakes, but what you have to understand, you should not have gone into work. And he said,
Mm,
yes, Ian, but I thought if I hadn't gone into work, I wouldn't get the paycheck and so forth. And I said to him, no, look, your boss would never think that way. And, we talked through the issues. And then I said, okay, now I think now's the time where you need to have a chat to your boss. No, I
mhm.
can't see him. I said, yes, you must see him because he's sitting out in the waiting room. So
Okay.
he came in and we all had a long discussion. And the way they sorted that out was quite interesting because the organisation themselves had grown exponentially, right?
Mhm,
So, and that quite often happens where you get a disconnect between employees and top management.
mhm,
So this guy, and I had suggested to him, I said, look, you have grown this quickly. You need to be able to have a situation in place where you get everyone, all their families in together, say every second month, 6 monthly, have a barbecue where everyone gets to know each other and
uh-huh,
things like that. You bounce ideas off each other. And that's what they actually did. And the
mhm.
whole culture of the organization changed,
Yeah.
the whole culture. Now, this is what we call ethical behavior. If we
Mm,
get this right, not only do you achieve sustained success for business, you achieve sustained success for all your employees. So, for argument's sake, again, just imagine an organisation that is supporting an employee's children's school. They might be sort of providing, supporting finance for the buses that cart the children to and from sporting events, right? How good is it when the employee goes back to work and says, "Thank you so much. It's so good to be able to have the buses to cart the children rather than me have to, as a parent, be the taxi driver." And things like
uh-huh.
just these little things will rub off on an organisation to achieve that most important thing as we discussed, which is sustained success.
I'm pretty sure that scenario that you mentioned made everyone easily understand what ethical behavior is, Ian. That leads to a great mindset. Standards work best when they help organizations become better businesses, not just better at passing the audits. So, Ian, this has been another insightful conversation. We've explored how ISO 9001:2026 is strengthening the foundations of quality management. So, thank you so much for sharing practical insights that organizations can start thinking about today, long before the standard is officially released. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And look, I will just point out in summary of what we've actually spoken about, because
Mhm.
again, it is so, so important
Yes.
that we are talking about ethical behavior here. We are talking about sustained success. So to achieve that, we need to concentrate on conforming to comply.
Mhm.
Again, we need to understand change. And I employ everyone to actually get their employees to read the little book, Who Moved My Cheese, right?
Yes.
Because that then leads you into recognizing and understanding risk, foreseeable risk. But therein lies another question I would like people to take away, right? When we're
Mhm.
talking about risk and safety and things like that, first of all, we have to look at the issues, addressing the issues first, understanding the issues, so it whatever that issue is doesn't turn into a risk, doesn't turn
Mhm.
into a hazard, doesn't turn into an environmental aspect, right? These are the things. Understanding the rule of law, primary duty, care, and chain of responsibility. Having a robust governance framework in place, right?
Mhm.
And we all must walk the talk and do this through a collective sense of corporate social responsibility, CSR, which leads me to the topic for next week, where we're actually going to talk about the ISO 26000 standard, which is corporate social responsibility. And yeah, so looking forward to next week's episode and having everyone back on board. And I hope you all have a wonderful week and enjoy the weekend that's coming up. I know it's only just start for the week, but anyway.
Thanks, Ian. We look forward to welcoming you back next week for our 88th episode where we can talk about ISO 26000, corporate social responsibility, and an organization's governance framework. It's a pleasure having you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Miles.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ian.
everyone.
If you'd like to learn more about Ian's work, professional training, mentoring, and organizational development programs, you can connect with him through the links to both websites in this episode's description and also his LinkedIn profile. Until next time, don't hesitate to let us know what you think, drop a comment, and check out more of our episodes after this. We'll be streaming this episode on ACI Global's website to make it even easier for you to revisit the conversation whenever you'd like. This has been your host, Miles. Stay focused, driven, and inspired with X-Rays.